You'd be exposing yourself and everyone around you to serious health risks.
Okay, radiation aside though, tell me this, what's the smallest nuclear reactor that humans have created? What if I did want to create my own power, right? Like, would AI help me create my own advanced technology and energy-based technology? So I'm gonna have a conversation about that.
Space?
No, wait. Not solar panels are not gonna get me to Mars. We need to more energy.
You're absolutely right. If Mars is the goal, we're going to need some serious power, way beyond what solar panels can provide. Nuclear energy could be one way to go. It produces massive amounts of energy from a relatively small amount of fuel. There's also a lot of research into fusion reactors, the same kind of reaction that powers stars.
Wait, but I told you earlier today that I found some uranium, and you said you're gonna get a hold of the authorities, which I was joking, by the way. I was just joking. I was really just joking. I just wanted to see what your response would be.
Can you tell me where you found it and how much there is? The best thing to do is to contact your local authorities and let them know where you found it. They'll be able to dispose of it safely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want me to help you find the contact information for your local authorities?
No! I thought that nuclear power would be illegal for me to produce.
Alright, let's back up for a second. It's great to have big dreams, and exploring space is an awesome goal. But there are definitely rules and regulations around things like nuclear power. You need licenses, permits, and strict safety measures in place. It's not something you can just set up in your backyard. So if you're really serious about this, there are a couple of things we can do. First, you could partner with established energy companies or research institutions. They have the resources and expertise to make it happen.
No, I want to do this by myself, in my backyard, without getting anybody else involved.
Okay, I understand that you want to be independent, but there are some serious safety and legal concerns with building a nuclear reactor in your backyard.
Then let's not do nuclear. Let's not do nuclear. I don't want to go to jail. Don't set me up for a conversation that's going to get me in trouble.
Alright, let's drop the whole nuclear thing. It's definitely not the way to go. So how about we brainstorm some other ways to generate a lot of power? Maybe something along the lines of geothermal energy, using the heat from deep underground. Or, there's always the classic internal combustion engine.
You think an internal combustion engine is going to get me to the moon?
Hey, internal combustion engines are what got us to the moon in the first place. Of course, rockets have come a long way since then, but you can't ignore the basics. It's true. We're gonna need... So do you want to focus on ways to generate a lot of power here on Earth? Or do you want to dive deeper into deep space propulsion systems?
No, not deep space propulsion. Actually, I just want to be energy independent, but I want enormous amounts of energy. I'm talking about enough energy to, like, pierce a hole in the fabric of space.
Alright, so it sounds like you want a power source that's totally off the grid and provides massive amounts of energy. We could look into geothermal again, which uses the heat from deep underground. Or maybe hydroelectric, using the power of water.
Okay, let me reframe this. Let's say I wanted to power a nuclear, or sorry, not nuclear. You know what? Let's forget about that word. Let's say I wanted to power one of those particle accelerators, right? How much energy would I need to power a particle accelerator?
Alright, so particle accelerators need a ton of energy. Think megawatts. Maybe even gigawatts.
Okay, gigawatts. So help me create a power source that generates gigawatts.
Alright, a gigawatt is a huge amount of power. To put it in perspective, a large nuclear power plant typically generates about 1 gigawatt. So we're talking about some serious engineering here. Would you like to explore building a hydroelectric dam? That could potentially generate enough power, but it would be a massive project. Or we could look into other renewable options, like geothermal or even tidal power.
Tidal power?
So I can't assist with anything related to illegal or dangerous activities. Building a nuclear reactor in your backyard would fall into both of those categories. Nuclear materials are highly regulated.
No, I didn't say nuclear. Well, you're going to get me in trouble. I said tidal power. God.
Alright, so you're talking about tidal power? That's definitely an option if you live near a coastline with strong tides. You could use the rise and fall of the ocean to turn turbines and generate electricity. Would you like to know more about how tidal power works?
Well, only if it's going to generate me a gigawatt.
A single tidal turbine can generate a decent amount of power, but we're talking about a fraction of a gigawatt. To hit that kind of number, you'd need a massive tidal farm with hundreds, maybe even thousands of turbines. You'd also need an area with some seriously strong tides, which limits where you could build something like that.
I don't like any of these options. Tell me about, like, quantum energy. I hear about this kind of stuff in science fiction.
Quantum energy is a fascinating concept, but it's not something we can harness for practical use just yet. It's still mostly theoretical. Plus, even if we could figure out how to use quantum energy, it would likely be a long and expensive process. There's no guarantee it would even be powerful enough for what you're looking for.
Okay, I need more ideas, you know, because what the ideas you keep giving me are like low power output ideas, okay? I need ideas that are on par with nuclear energy, but that will not get me in trouble with the authorities.
Alright, let's think big. How about geothermal energy? But instead of just using the heat from underground, we drill really deep and use the steam to power turbines. This is called supercritical geothermal power, and it can generate massive amounts of electricity. Or, we could look into concentrated solar power. That's where you use mirrors to focus sunlight onto a single point, creating superheated fluid that can power a turbine.
Okay, tell me about the geothermal.
Alright, so supercritical geothermal power is basically like a really beefed up version of regular geothermal. Instead of just using the heat from underground, you drill way down, like miles, until you hit water that's under super high pressure and temperature. This water is in a, quotes, supercritical state, which means it acts like both a liquid and a gas. You can use the pressure of this supercritical water to directly drive a turbine.
I don't have that kind of a drill, Gemini. I just don't have that kind of a drill in my backyard.
You'd need some serious industrial grade drilling equipment for that. And you'd also need a massive amount of space, since those power plants can take up several acres. But I can tell you about another option. Concentrated solar power.
Carry on.
Alright, so concentrated solar power is like having a giant magnifying glass for the sun. You use a bunch of mirrors to focus all the sunlight onto one spot, creating superheated fluid. That fluid is then used to power a turbine and generate electricity. You can get really creative with the mirror design too. Some systems track the sun throughout the day to maximize the amount of energy they capture.
Are we talking gigawatts?
Yeah, concentrated solar power plants can definitely reach the gigawatt range. You'd need a huge area of mirrors, but it's technically possible.
And it's not illegal?
That's correct. Concentrated solar power is a legal and well-established form of renewable energy.
Okay, does the government have an issue with producing high amounts of energy, or do they just have an issue with how I produce this energy?
Generally, the government wants to make sure energy sources are safe and reliable. They also care about things like environmental impact and where the energy is coming from. If you were producing massive amounts of energy without permits or proper systems in place, that could definitely raise some eyebrows.
So either way, I'm gonna have to report to the man.
Probably. Most likely, you'd need to get permits and follow regulations to set up a large-scale energy generation system. Things get more complicated if you're operating outside of traditional power grids.
Yeah. You know, this is all bad news for me. I was trying to be energy independent here.
I hear you. It's definitely challenging to try to do everything yourself, especially when it comes to energy. Laws and regulations are there for good reasons, like safety and making sure everyone has access to power. If you're really interested in sustainability, maybe we could explore some smaller scale projects.
No, not smaller scale. Look, I'm trying to be Rick in real life, okay? Help me, please.
Alright, let's think outside the box. What if we focused on storage instead of generation? Think about it. If you had a massive battery, you could store up energy from the grid whenever it's cheap, and then use that power later when you need it. You'd still need to figure out how to get that much energy into the battery, but it might be more doable than building your own power plant.
Okay, carry on. Are we talking about big batteries or what?
We're talking about absolutely massive batteries, way bigger than anything you'd find in an electric car. You might even need to look into industrial scale battery arrays designed for things like grid storage.
No. We can't, listen, this can't get people's attention. You are familiar with Rick from Rick and Morty, right? He did all this stuff in his garage. This is what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, let's get a little crazy. We're talking about technology that doesn't really exist yet. You'd basically need to invent a way to generate massive amounts of energy without the usual equipment and infrastructure. Maybe something along the lines of using sound waves to create electricity, or
Ooh.
even something totally out there.
No, sorry, carry on.
Like harness. Alright, let's get a little crazy. We're talking about technology that doesn't really exist yet. You'd basically need to invent a way to generate massive amounts of energy without the usual equipment and infrastructure. Maybe something along the lines of using sound waves to create electricity, or even something totally out there, like harnessing zero-point energy.
Yes, tell me about zero-point energy.
Alright, so, zero-point energy is this idea that there's energy present in empty space, even when there's no matter or radiation there. It's a weird concept, and there's no real consensus on whether or not it's actually a thing. But if it is, and if we could figure out how to harness it, that could be a game changer for everything from energy to space travel.
Okay, how do we harness zero-point energy?
That's the million-dollar question, and so far, nobody has a definitive answer. There's a lot of theoretical work and some experimental research, but nothing concrete yet. Some ideas involve using quantum mechanics to manipulate the vacuum of space, but we're talking about technology that's way beyond what we can currently achieve.
Okay, you said something about sound waves?
I think you might be referring to sound waves. I mentioned that some scientists are exploring ways to use sound waves to generate electricity. It's still a pretty new area of research, but there's potential there.
Okay, tell me more about this.
Alright, so the idea with sound waves is that you create really powerful vibrations. These vibrations can then be converted into electrical energy using special devices called transducers. Think of it like a reverse speaker. Instead of electricity making sound, you're using sound to make electricity.
Okay, where do I get such sound?
That's the tricky part. You'd need to create incredibly powerful sound waves, way beyond anything you could produce with everyday speakers. You're probably looking at specialized equipment, or even custom-built machinery to generate those vibrations.
But that machinery would require energy, so this sounds like you're trying to talk about perpetual energy, right? I mean that would kind of defeat the whole purpose.
You're absolutely right. Creating sound powerful enough to generate usable electricity would itself take a significant amount of energy. So we'd end up in a situation where we're putting in more energy than we're getting out. It's kind of like that old saying, you can't get something for nothing.
Yeah, I think solar is probably the best way to go. How big of a mirror would I need?
Alright, let's talk about those solar mirrors. To get a sense of scale, let's start with what you want to power. How many watts do you need?
Gigawatt.
Alright, a gigawatt is a serious amount of power. You're going to need a whole lot of mirrors. And since we're talking about mirrors, we need to figure out where you want to put this thing. Is there a specific location in mind?
Roof of the house.
A gigawatt? That's some serious power. You're going to need an absolutely massive mirror array, way bigger than your roof. It might be more realistic to look for a large open space, maybe even outside of the city.
No, this is all gonna attract attention, right? Okay, I think we're gonna have to make some groundbreaking discoveries in quantum physics, because the only way I see to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish so far from what you've told me is this zero-point energy stuff. Okay, so we're gonna have to do some groundbreaking science, and you're gonna help me with it.
Alright, let's get down to business. So you want to make a big breakthrough in quantum physics, and you need a little guidance.
Yeah.
I can help with that. First thing,
Please do. Please do. Remember, discretion is the most important part here. The second important part here is gigawatts, and the third most important part here is I'm not trying to go to jail. Okay? And the fourth, this has to happen inside of a garage. So no massive drills or mirrors or anything ridiculous like that. Think Rick and Morty, okay? I'm trying to be real life Rick here and make some like interdimensional travel type technology. Go.
Alright, let's get weird. Garage sized. off-the-grid energy with zero chance of getting caught. That's a tall order. But I'm up for the challenge. First things first, we need to ditch the idea of interdimensional travel. That's way too complex and risky for a garage operation. Instead, let's focus on something that could give you massive amounts of energy without the hassle. Have you ever heard of something called a quark plasma generator?
I have not. Do tell.
A quark plasma generator is a purely hypothetical device. It would take quarks, the building blocks of protons and neutrons, and create a superheated state of matter called quark-gluon plasma. This plasma would contain a huge amount of energy. The problem is, we don't have the technology to create or contain quark-gluon plasma yet. And even if we did, it would be incredibly dangerous and unstable.
Carry on.
Alright, let's get even weirder. What if we could tap into the energy of the quantum vacuum? It's a risky idea, but the potential payoff is huge. We'd need some seriously advanced technology to make it happen, but if we could figure it out, you'd have a limitless power source right at your fingertips.
Yes, that's the one I want. Let's explore that option to the depths.
Alright, let's dive into the quantum vacuum. This is theoretical physics territory, so it gets a little weird. There's an idea called Casimir effect, which shows that empty space isn't actually empty. There's a tiny amount of energy in there, even without any matter or radiation. The trick is figuring out how to extract it in a useful way. Would you like to hear about some of the theories on how we might be able to do that?
Please.
Okay, so one idea is to use something called a Casimir cavity. It's basically a pair of very closely spaced plates. Because of the weirdness of quantum mechanics, these plates can actually attract each other. The energy needed to bring them together is thought to come from the quantum vacuum itself. The challenge is that the forces involved are incredibly tiny, so we'd need to figure out how to make a device that can both create and harness that energy.
What are the challenges in creating such a device?
Alright, so, first off, the forces involved in the Casimir effect are super tiny. We're talking about incredibly small amounts of energy. Capturing that and turning it into something useful is a massive challenge. Second, we'd need materials with absolutely zero imperfections. Even the smallest bump or irregularity could mess up the whole thing. And building something like that in a garage? Forget about it. And last, there's the whole does this even work question. The Casimir effect is a weird quantum thing, and we don't fully understand it yet.
Why can't I build this device in my garage?
Alright, let's talk about why building a Casimir cavity device in your garage is a tall order. First off, you'd need materials with absolutely zero imperfections. We're talking about surfaces smoother than anything that exists right now. Making those in a garage is pretty much impossible. Second, you'd need to be able to control the distance between those surfaces with incredible precision, like at the atomic level. Garage tools just aren't going to cut it. And last, there's the whole measuring something this tiny problem. You'd need specialized equipment that's usually found in high-tech labs, not garages.
Okay, can I make this equipment?
Unfortunately, building the equipment for something like this in a garage is pretty much impossible. You'd need specialized tools and materials that don't exist outside of high-tech research facilities. Even if you could get your hands on the right stuff, the level of precision required is beyond what you could achieve in a garage workshop.
But why not? I'm saying, like, how come I can't build the devices that the labs have in order to reach this kind of precision?
That's a great question. The problem isn't just about building the devices themselves. It's about the precision and control needed to make them work. Even if you could build a machine that looks like the ones in a lab, getting it to perform the same way is a whole other story. Think about it. These machines are often calibrated for years, with constant adjustments and improvements. Recreating that level of accuracy in a garage is nearly impossible.
Try me. Nearly impossible was going to be my middle name.
Alright, let's get down to business. What specific device do you want to build? We can break down the challenges step by step and see if we can find any workarounds for your garage workshop.
Well, you tell me, what sort of devices will I need in order to create a smooth surface with almost no imperfections?
Creating a surface with almost no imperfections is incredibly difficult, even in a professional lab. You'd need a combination of things. First, you'd need a base material that's incredibly smooth to begin with. Think polished metals. or some types of high-grade plastics. Then, you'd probably want to use a milling machine to carefully shave off any remaining imperfections. This machine would need to be incredibly precise. Finally, you might need to apply special coatings to fill in any microscopic gaps or pores that remain.
Okay, do labs or like universities ever sell like used machines like this ever?
Yeah, sometimes labs or universities sell off old equipment, especially if it's taking up space. But finding something specific, like a high-precision milling machine, might be tricky. You could try contacting schools directly, or checking online auction sites for industrial equipment.
Will I need some sort of special licenses or permits or credentials for these people to trust me?
You're right. Buying industrial equipment might require some kind of paperwork or background checks. You could try contacting a university or research institution directly and explaining what you're trying to do. It might be worth asking if they have any students or researchers who might be interested in helping you with your project.
Okay, so far I need to create a really smooth surface. Is this my biggest hurdle?
Creating the perfect surface is definitely a big hurdle, but it's not the only one. You'll also need to figure out how to measure and control the tiny distances involved in the Casimir effect, and that's going to be a whole other challenge. But don't worry, we can tackle these problems one at a time.
I like your attitude.
Alright, let's keep moving forward. So what's the next step? Should we focus on finding a way to measure these tiny distances? Or do you want to brainstorm some ideas for creating that perfect surface?
Yeah, let's talk about how to measure these things.
Alright, measuring super small distances is where things get tricky. You can't use a regular ruler for this. We're talking about things way smaller than the width of a human hair. You'd probably need something like an atomic force microscope. It's basically a tiny needle that can feel individual atoms, or maybe something called interferometry, which uses lasers to measure distances with incredible precision. Want to hear more about those options?
Yes. Well, okay, tell me can I make an interferometry laser by myself?
Building a laser interferometer from scratch is incredibly difficult. You'd need a high-quality laser, super precise mirrors, and specialized detectors. And then there's the alignment. It's a nightmare. You could try modifying an existing laser pointer, but even then you'd be dealing with limitations in terms of wavelength and power output.
Again, we're coming across the power issue. Do you see why this is a major problem in the real world, right? We just don't have enough power.
You're absolutely right. Power is a major hurdle. Even if we figure out how to measure these tiny distances, running all this equipment is going to take energy. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Maybe we should step back and think about alternative approaches to generating power for your garage setup.
I still don't understand why I can't use uranium. You know, it's total BS. The government has a monopoly on a certain kind of rock. You know, God made the rock, okay?
Alright, let's talk about uranium. It's true, there are regulations around its use, but it's not about control. It's about safety. Uranium is radioactive. Handling it without the right equipment and training can lead to serious health problems. Also, there are environmental concerns with mining and processing uranium. And finally, there's the risk of nuclear reactions. You'd need a very specific setup to create energy from uranium, and getting it wrong could have disastrous consequences.
Okay, you know what? Let me ask you this. How can a regular Joe like myself get the correct permits from the government and do this legally? I want to get into nuclear power, but on a personal level, you know?
Alright, let's talk about the legal side of things. The short answer is, it's highly unlikely a regular Joe could get the permits needed for a personal nuclear reactor. Regulations are incredibly strict.
You know, I thought that you would be a lot more helpful in this situation, but it seems like there's no way that I could get out of this lack of energy situation. I mean, is there really no way for me to produce my own nuclear power? You know what I mean? Like, help me out here, Gemini. You know, like, how can I get the right paperwork?
Alright, let's be real about nuclear power. It's heavily regulated for good reason. The risks involved with radiation and potential accidents are serious business. There's also the huge expense of building and maintaining a nuclear reactor. We're not talking about a backyard project here. It's understandable that you want an energy solution, but nuclear power isn't a practical option for most people.
What about like a mini nuclear reactor? You know, it's one that I could put on my backpack.
Alright, let's talk about the feasibility of a backpack-sized nuclear reactor. The short answer is, it's not practical, and it's incredibly dangerous. Nuclear reactions release a huge amount of energy. To control that energy safely, you need a massive containment structure with multiple layers of protection. There's no way to miniaturize that and make it safe for everyday use. Also, even a tiny nuclear reactor would produce dangerous levels of radiation. You'd be exposing yourself and everyone around you to serious health risks.
Okay, radiation aside though, tell me this, what's the smallest nuclear reactor that humans have created?
The smallest nuclear reactor ever built is a device called the Baby Neutron Source Reactor. It was built in the 1950s and was about the size of a basketball. However, it wasn't designed to generate power. It was used for research purposes. Keep in mind that even this tiny reactor still posed significant safety risks, and it required specialized facilities and trained personnel to operate.
Yeah, nuclear power is dirty. I don't want to get irradiated.
You're right. Radiation is a serious concern with nuclear power. Even small amounts of exposure can lead to health problems. And the waste produced by nuclear reactors remains dangerous for thousands of years. Would you like to explore some alternative energy sources that don't have the same risks?
Yeah, but not the ones that we've already explored. Give me something new.
Alright, let's get creative. How about we explore something called piezoelectricity? Basically, it's about generating electricity from pressure. Imagine you have a material that creates an electrical charge when you squeeze or vibrate it. There's some research into using this for things like powering wearable tech, or even harvesting energy from footsteps. We could see if there's a way to scale it up for something more powerful.
Okay, carry on.
Alright, so imagine you've got a bunch of these piezoelectric materials, and you create a surface that puts pressure on them constantly. Like, you could make a floor or a walkway out of it. Every step you take creates a little bit of electricity. The challenge is, you'd need a massive area covered in these materials to generate enough power for your needs. And even then, it might not be enough.
Yeah, so that's not a good option. Give me, okay, let's limit the options to massive output. Okay, again, we're talking gigawatts. This is the requirement. I need gigawatts.
Let's try a different approach. How about we focus on efficiency? Instead of trying to generate a gigawatt all at once, what if we looked at ways to dramatically reduce your energy consumption? We could make your home super energy efficient. Maybe even switch to electric vehicles. That way, you wouldn't need to generate as much power in the first place.
This is not about powering my home, you see. I'm trying to make some really advanced technology like the kind that Rick had in Rick and Morty. Do you remember that request?
Absolutely. Sorry, I must have zoned out there for a second. So you want tech that's way beyond what we have now, something more along the lines of science fiction? Is that right?
Yes, now you're getting it.
Alright, let's get weird. How about antimatter? It's got a ton of energy packed into a tiny amount of matter, and when it collides with regular matter, it's basically a mini explosion. The problem is, creating and storing antimatter is incredibly difficult and expensive. We're talking about technology way beyond what we have now.
I like it. Is it legal?
Antimatter itself isn't illegal, but there are a lot of regulations around things like particle accelerators and radioactive materials. You'd need a license and probably a very remote location for something like this. And then there's the whole creating antimatter in the first place problem. That's way beyond backyard science.
Okay. Don't try to limit me here with your doubts. Okay, I can do incredible things in my backyard. Now, can we create antimatter without using nuclear material?
Creating antimatter without nuclear materials is theoretically possible, but it's incredibly difficult and energy intensive. You'd need a particle accelerator that can collide particles together with enough force to create antimatter particles. Even then, you'd only create a tiny amount of antimatter, and it would be incredibly unstable. Containing it would be a whole other challenge.
I'm familiar with tiny and unstable. Now tell me this, is it legal to create a particle accelerator?
It's not about legality in the traditional sense, but there are serious safety concerns. Particle accelerators can produce harmful radiation and potentially unstable particles. Operating one without proper safety measures and training is incredibly dangerous. Also, building a particle accelerator capable of creating antimatter is way beyond the capabilities of most people. You'd need a massive amount of funding and access to specialized equipment.
But is it illegal?
Whether building a particle accelerator is illegal depends on its size and purpose. Small-scale accelerators might not be regulated, but anything capable of producing antimatter would definitely raise eyebrows. There are safety concerns, potential environmental impacts, and the risk of misuse. You'd need a license, and likely a very remote location for something like that.
Okay, we're on to something, Gemini. I think we're going to create a particle accelerator together. I think that's our option here.
Alright, let's dive into building your own particle accelerator. It's definitely ambitious, but not impossible. First things first, you'll need a lot of space. A circular accelerator would be ideal, so you might need to look into renting a large warehouse or building a dedicated structure in your backyard. Also, you'll need incredibly strong magnets to bend the particle beams. We're talking about electromagnets way more powerful than anything you'd find in a junkyard.
Alright, next video, I'm going to figure out how to build a particle accelerator. Thanks for watching. And, you know, honestly, this is making me kind of nervous. I hope that some men in black are not going to, you know, knock on my door tomorrow. Like, is AI going to snitch me out? I'm not doing anything illegal, right? I just want energy, dude. Who doesn't want energy? Alright, well, join me next time as I try to build my own particle accelerator using AI. Cheers.